Welcome to Backstory and Beyond with your host, Ward Kampf, seeker, innovator, and president of Northwood Retail. As Ward travels the country, he'll share the industry insights he's gained over a 3 decades-long retail career, introduce you to trailblazing business leaders and disruptive founders, and uncover the real deal about some of the greatest cities in the world. This week, Ward meets up with Jim Noble, restaurateur behind 3 of the Bowl at Ballantyne's concepts, Bossy Beulah's, Roosters, and Copain. They'll explore Jim's childhood on a southern farm, how he helped turn Charlotte into a culinary city, and his commitment to using his talents to make good food accessible to all. All that and more on this episode of Backstory and Beyond.
I'm here in Charlotte today. I want to welcome Jim Noble. We've opened a couple of your concepts, Roosters, Bossy Beulah's, and soon, hopefully, Copain. So thank you for being our guest and coming down. And I know you're busy and you do a lot for this community, so thanks for your time.
Well, thank you for having me, and thanks for the partnership at the Bowl. And you guys have been awesome to work with, and we're excited about the future, and I'm glad to be here and honored to be here. Thank you.
I'll start with what we kind of researched. You know, you go to college, you go to North Carolina State, you major in engineering, you and your fraternity brothers have a bar, which in college, why not? But the engineering background, very similar to John Moreno at OMB. You know, I think there's a lot you can do if you have the fundamentals of engineering. So, you know, you go to college. When was your real first foray into hospitality?
Sometimes people ask me, how did I get in the restaurant business? And I say I had too much wine to drink one night, probably. This is back before I was a pastor, obviously. I've always been passionate about food and the holidays and families getting together. I love the fellowship. When everybody brings all their food together, it's just a great thing. So I've always been interested in it. I originally went to dental school, and then I failed miserably at practicum. And I said, this ain't for me. So I said, I'm going to go into furniture manufacturing and management. It's a part of the industrial engineering department at NC State. And I've loved it. I love furniture. I love woodworking. And I was going to go sell furniture. And we opened that bar the last year I was in school. And after I graduated in the December of 78, I went on the road selling furniture. And I said, this ain't for me. The interest rates were like 18% in those days. So I went back to the bar business where my buddies were, and then did that for about a year in Raleigh, North Myrtle Beach. We were mainly going for college kids. Went to Athens, Georgia, and opened up a bar in downtown Athens. And then me and 2 of my fraternity brothers left and went and opened a place in Clemson. I had a grandmother who's a strong believer, strong Christian, and I couldn't tell her I had a bar. I told her I had a cafe. So she tried to come visit us at Bullwinkle's, which was the bar. And it was a football game day. We weren't there. We didn't open until like 7 o'clock at night. And I'm so thankful. Thank God that she did not see what was inside those doors because she thought I had a cafe. And then a couple years later, I moved back and opened a restaurant in High Point. I'd been studying food and wine. I was just teaching myself how to cook. And except for a short stint at North Myrtle Beach one summer while I was in college, it was the first restaurant I worked in was my own. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew how to cook. I found a bakery in Greensboro because I couldn't find good bread, and I started buying bread from them. And then the couple that owned it left, and the baker, the boulanger, was there, Jacques Gombert. And I said, you want to keep doing this? He said, yeah. And so I was able to start going into other restaurants trying to sell bread, but I could see how they set their kitchens up. I would just watch the kitchens.
So you have Roosters, you have Bossy Beulah, you have Noble Smoke, Copain, the Jimmy.
And Phil P. Catering, which is like agrarian. There's no, the little like pink eyed peas, white acre field peas, Crowder peas, all these legume potted peas that are just so indigenous to this part of the country. And Copain is sort of a French bakery that's been in my heart for, 40 years. The Jimmy was a throwback to the 50s after the war, and all the Rat Pack like Dean Martin, Sinatra, Sammy Davis, they would all go to Europe around the Mediterranean coast, and it's just supposed to be sort of Italian, French influence. The Roosters was an answer to being only a special event restaurant. I said, we're going to open a restaurant that serves great food, but you can come to 2 or 3 times a week. And it's open kitchen. You see all the wood-fired cooking. You sit around the kitchen. You can talk to guys while they're working, guys and gals. Noble Smoke it's our barbecue restaurant. It's been in my heart for 30-some years. And if you go into Noble Smoke, there's 4 flags. First one's American flag, because I'm American. The second flag is French. My first restaurant was French. Then you see a North Carolina flag. Then I started doing local cuisine. And then the last one is a Texas flag, because we did Texas brisket in that one. So
right. Everybody looks up to you in this community. You know, Charleston's now a food town. Charlotte, the last 10 years, all of a sudden has a big food scene. You're part of it. One of the things that confounds me is you really didn't work in a restaurant, self-taught. I think you said that you taught yourself Julia Child's mastering French cooking. And like very few successful at-scale restaurateurs start that way.
Well, you probably saw the movie Julia and Julia.
Yeah.
And Julia Child was trying to sell her book, and she finally found an editor who took the book home and cooked beef bourguignon. When she tasted, she went, oh my. I had that same experience probably about 81. I'd gotten a hold of her book. I mean, it took me about, at this time, it was a big investment for me. I wrestled with it for 2 or 3 weeks and finally I said, I'm buying them. So the first thing I ever cooked was chicken fricassee. I never cooked this way before, but when I cooked it and then I tasted it, I went, oh my gosh, I've never tasted food like this. And when I saw the movie, I said, that's what I did. I mean, I said, this thing blew me away. I was raised on Southern cuisine, and not like soul so much, but a blend of Southern cuisine, which is butter beans. My grandfather had a garden, so I've been around small farms for a long time, and we would go there in the summertime when I was a kid, sit outside under the oak tree, no air conditioning, it's hot, and we would eat on a table. And if you've ever been to Noble Smoke, you know I'm a carnivore. I love meat.
Yeah.
But he would have probably 10, 12 vegetables on the table, sliced tomatoes, fried okra, butter beans, squash, all like just cucumbers. We would eat, and if it wasn't meat, it didn't make any difference to me because we were eating really what's just called farm to table. It's like from the garden to the table, which is like 100 yards, you know. So that also gave me an inspiration. I was doing composting and organic farming in about 1990, right before we opened the second restaurant. But
do you source it locally?
As much as I can. I mean, it's really hard to source 12 months of a year for local, but you can your meats and your proteins and stuff, but you do as much as you can local. We follow the season with what's coming, but being able to do that composting back in 1991, and then we started, and we also had about 20, 30 head of lamb. We had about 200 chickens, 60 rabbits, and I had about 12 bird dogs. And my wife looked at me, we're getting ready to open a second restaurant, and she said, oh, that's too much stuff. So I said, okay. So we killed the chickens, we ate them, we cooked them in the restaurant. We did the lamb, the same thing. And now in 2006, I said, I'm tired of being a special occasion for everybody. I want to do something where people come every day, but I can't call it Nobles anything because the name was a blessing at the same time. It was also hurt you because it's a special occasion. So we just called it Roosters. Every restaurant, Nobles Grill or La Spieta de Noble in Greensboro, or just Nobles in Charlotte, all of them had a rooster as a logo. I said, we're going to call this Roosters. They didn't really know it was me. And when the press asked me what it's about, I'd say when I get off work at night or chefs get finished work at night, how do we don't sit there and fix fancy plates. We grab some of this and this. We just kind of share and we eat. And that's what Roosters was. And at first we had to talk people and understand that you're going to share your food here and you're going to order 2 or 3 things. And it's a place that's unpretentious. It's a place that our regular customer can come 2 or 3 times a week. And that's exactly what they did.
Right. Super cool build out. I mean, everything you do is high touch. So you recently opened Roosters at the Bowl. Tell me about it.
I call it Roosters 2.0. In restaurant business, you have to continue to evolve and change. You don't have to go do trend. I don't do trend stuff, but what I do core-wise, I just keep staying current. But Roosters 2.0, it's just a newer, cleaner look. Same 4 materials that we had in the beginning. Roosters: wood, stone, leather, and steel, which are all handcrafted materials for hundreds of years, thousands of years that people used to build or work with, and which parallels what Roosters is. All our food's hand wrought. We spit roast over wood. We roast things in the oven. We have local produce and stuff. It's all a lot of handwork.
I think part of your theme is, great results take patience. You're into fly fishing. It's a very delicate thing. People think it's easy. I mean, there's a real art to it, from the tying the fly to how they're running, where they are, the rocks, all that stuff. How did that start to tie into Roosters? And
the fly has been on our to-go bag for probably 6 or 8 years, and we sort of updated our brand. We redid the menu a little bit and incorporated the fly in there, which is a sulfur dun, which is one of my buddies who was a fly fishing guide and a dear friend for many years, who passed away almost 3 years ago. I said, "What's your favorite fly?" He goes, "Sulfur dun." In fly fishing, you're always working with your hands and hand-to-eye coordination, and it's just like cuisine. You need to see what you're doing. You need to take the time to do it right. You can get it done quicker, but and here's another thing I always say. I watch how someone takes the meat out of the drawer of the refrigerator and puts it on the plate. If he slings it, I'm like, that's somebody's dinner. You got to treat it better respect than that. You have to, don't throw it. You place it out there, because that animal gave up his life for us, and it's going to be somebody's dinner. Don't treat it like it's a commodity. It's not. This is somebody's meal.
I think part of your mantra is keep it simple.
Surtout fait simple.
Yeah.
That's what Escoffier said. I didn't know that until I bought the book on Ritz and Escoffier, and I read that when Escoffier took over the kitchen, he said, "Surtout fait simple." In other words, in French, it means above all, keep it simple. And that's always the way I've cooked. And when people look at my menu, they go, this doesn't seem real fancy, but then they'd eat it and they'd finish the whole dish. And sometimes you go places where the food's really jacked up, tons of flavor. So you get about halfway through and you're done. So we've always tried to keep it simple. And one of the things you'll see on the back of our shirts in Noble Smoke is salt, pepper, smoke. That's it.
The thing about Noble Smoke, I think you go through 12 or 1,400 pounds a day of beef, all different regions of barbecue, but it felt like to me that was a passion for you.
I wanted to do a barbecue restaurant probably for 35 years before I did it. I've had smokers built. I used to use them dual purposes. I'd take them to catering events and use them as a grill, or I'd take them and smoke with them. And the biggest thing I didn't want to do was to come off as some chef who's going to teach everybody about barbecue. And I'm saying, no, I just want to do barbecue. I'm going to do the best barbecue I can, but I honor all those guys. We call them the legends. The top 2 legends are Wayne Monk and Pete Jones and Sam Jones, all their whole family, Skylight, and then guys all over the country and that made an impact on barbecue. And I look at them like, I get to do this restaurant, and I wanted to pay tribute to the guys and say, I just want to do barbecue, and I honor these guys, because I didn't want to come up with some cocky chef. There's one thing about barbecue. Everybody that comes in the door is an expert on barbecue, because they smoke it themselves or whatever. Everybody loves it. And I say, I just like to be there with you. And if I can make it for you, that's great.
Well, and everybody has an opinion on it, right? Vinegar or dry or...
And I always say, you're all right.
Yeah. What choice do you have? But
yeah,
it feels like that was a passion project. You mentioned your Aunt Beulah. You have Bossy Beulah.
Actually, her name was Aunt Butte. Somebody owned the name Butte's Burgers out in the middle of nowhere on the West Coast. And I said, I'm doing Butte's. That's my Aunt Butte.
Right.
Can I do it? And they said, no, we can't. We won't. Yeah. I said, okay, Aunt Beulah. But as soon as that place goes out of business, I'm going back to the trademark, and I'm going to get Aunt Butte, and then I'm going to change it to Aunt Butte's, because she was called Bossy Beulah.
Right.
She was about 80, 90 pounds soaking wet. She smoked Winston cigarettes. She'd nip a little Canadian whiskey and babysit for us. And we'd say Saturday night, say, Butte, will you cook us chicken tomorrow after church? And she always would. She did pan-fried, cast iron skillet, cooked chicken. Everybody did back then. I mean, everybody's chicken tasted excellent like that. But she'd cook it for us. And so it was a tribute to her to say thank you for all you did for us and taking care of us and putting up with us when we grew up. But she was a hoot. She was bossy, but she didn't boss anybody around. She just thought she knew everything. It's funny.
So you pay tribute to her before you open, your first Bossy's. I think the first time you introduced the sandwich was at your King's Kitchen. Mm-hmm. This is where we get into the beyond the table.
Yeah.
But, King's Kitchen, there's a couple things that, really touch me because, you have fed 1 million people since 2001.
That's been the number. During COVID, when we had to shut the restaurants down, well, I just turned everything into, this is when my industrial engineering came in. We turned the restaurants in 2020 into food manufacturing facilities. At Smoke, we set up 3 long tables across the main dining room. We could set up 500 boxes at one time, and we would cook food and put it on carts and just started passing it out. We take it to the neighborhoods we visited. We did 170,000 meals in 12 months, and we were able to through partnership with the restaurant side and the ministry side, raise the capital, reimburse the restaurants back. It costs. It's like $5 or $6 to do what we do because we don't do soup kitchen food. We take our food that we do in the restaurants and box it up so someone gets a decent meal. It's so easy to get a bad meal out there. So we did that, and we were able to keep everybody working, yet feed a ton of people. If you look at this metropolitan area, it's about 10% are in food insufficiency. That means a quarter of a million people aren't getting decent food. Well, if they say somebody has a need, I'm going to find a way to get it there. Then I'm going to go back to our generous partners and donors and say, help me feed. And they may not always agree with the faith-based side of what we do, but everybody does have a heart to feed those in need. And I don't know how you could not feed someone when someone's hungry. And when we open up Kate's Kitchen, I tell folks, if you get hungry, you come around here, we'll feed you. And then the line starts, and then it gets out of hand, and then we have to stop it and start it again. But talking to the guys at the city one time, I said, well, there's a problem. All these restaurants uptown feed people. I said, who is that? They said, well, you're the biggest. I said, well, that's what I'm there for.
Right. I was on the board of Goodwill. Part of our mission was just, take people that weren't employable or incarcerated or whatever and give them a chance. So I think, big hats off to you with coming up with that idea. But I think, you talk about food insecurity, and I think people think that's a small percentage of what is a first world country. But, I think the numbers are closer probably to 12, 15, maybe higher. If you take people are skipping meals when inflation hit, it really exposed the problem. Oh, yeah. And it's growing.
And in these food deserts, they end up going and getting meals out of a convenience store, and that's all processed, packaged food. I think we as chefs have an obligation to our communities and to the people that we meet in an education process, but a supply process. Start doing healthy, clean food and quit doing cheap stuff or cooking with the wrong oils or cutting corners, not cutting corners, but going the extra mile to get away from processed foods. I mean, just for example, the bread that we do at Copain it's about a 3-day process. It's all naturally fermented sour. The signature loaf is a 70% super fat of wheat. And the other 30% is all just organic bread flour. They all come from mills here in North Carolina. And people that can't eat bread in the United States, that can go to Europe and eat bread, can eat our bread because there's something about it that's not processed. And I think chefs have an obligation not only to create great food, but also create great healthy food. I'll say this, I'm not a big fan of this group, but Walmart has probably done more to introduce and help lower the price of organic produce because they're trying to put it in their stores. Hats off, because it makes it easier and more. And when organic's hard to get, it's expensive. But if you can raise it better and you have a better demand for it, then the price can be more affordable for everybody. And I just think we've got to eat healthy.
So we talk a lot about, the founder's mentality. There's a book out there called The Founder's Mentality, and there are 3 pillars to it. You're the insurgent. So obviously you were going in the restaurant business. I mean, self-taught, self-made. You'd never been in it. There was something that gravitated you to it. The second part's how do you run the business, manage the cash, and the third part's the front line, and you see it in your restaurants. Some people are concerned every day, like, what are our biggest days or what are our reservations look like? How are sales that day? You've been in business for 40 years, which, there aren't a lot of restaurateurs that last 40 years. I mean, you be really good and you got to evolve over time.
My son asked me one time, you ever been fired? I said, I never worked for anybody. I couldn't be. I'd have to fire myself.
So that's kind of the founder's mentality that we explore. But you kind of have 2 front lines. You've got your restaurants, and then you've got this mission, and it's faith-based. 2010, you do your King's Kitchen. Then, you and your wife form a foundation. Then you bring the Dream Center in, which is tied to
a bigger church in there.
Yeah.
We were a church without walls. We were up at King's Kitchen. We're one of the few churches that had beer taps in the middle of the congregation. It's funny. But here's the funny thing. I thought one day that I'd be out of the restaurant business and full-time ministry. And I thought that was going to happen. And it didn't happen, but I know this. I love food. It's one of my passions. And not only to cook it, but also to eat it. And particularly putting wine and food together, which is just so much happens at the table. You get engaged. You celebrate your anniversary, you get married, sit down at the table, you have weddings, birthdays, everybody celebrates. We even mourn at the table. Go to the funeral, come back to sit around the table, and they start moving on with life again. And so much takes place at the table, and it's almost like it's somewhat of a spiritual thing to sit down at the table in the midst of all the turmoil in this world. You can take a break. You just stop the madness, sit down, enjoy a meal in company with somebody, and then you go back to the battle. It's a restoration. The word restaurant comes from a French word, restaurateur, which means to restore. Well, the original ministry we have is called restoration word ministry. The word of God will restore you back to where you're from. And there's such a parallel between ministering good to people and serving them. We're servants. We've jumped into a service to serve others. And if you don't like that, this is the wrong place to be.
It's hard to fathom that you fed that many people and then you continue to open all these successful restaurants. And I know, as you grow, you get more resources, right? You start to open Bossy Beulah's, which may be one of the hotter concepts. You have the Jimmy, which it's so different than a lot of your Southern cuisine. Mm-hmm. You can do the chicken, the Southern food that you like. But, you kind of run a wide gamut, in the food business, but also in this mission. Like you said, not everybody is attuned to the faith part of it, but they all agree on the mission part of it.
So the very first time we ever fed anybody was in High Point, and we got the High Point Community Foundation to sort of help us tell the story. So this Thanksgiving at Nobles, we're going to open the doors to all the folks in poverty. We had probably 300 people show up. We probably had 200 to 300 people show up to volunteer. I mean, that's where it started. I like to grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. Nobody wants to grow a team that's not growing. My wife says, why do you keep growing? I said, well, the only other option is to stop. And I'm not doing that. And it's not about how much can we make, how much difference can we make, how much impact can we make. And my wife and I both, we about cried in front of everybody today because just their hearts they poured out. And when people are down and out, they've given up. And the word hope from a biblical perspective means a joyful, intense expectation of good. When you don't have that, and we went through some things in our personal life where our gut was just kicked out from under us, and like there was no place to turn but to God. And I said, man, those guys, they need to know that it doesn't have to be this way. You can have hope for something better.
Wow, that's powerful. So one of the things we like to explore with our guests is the real deal. We like to know favorite restaurants, things you like to do outside of, when you're not in the restaurant.
I like holes in the walls. One of my favorite places growing up was a dog house in High Point. And when they asked me, I hit the newspaper one time. They said, "Where's your favorite place to eat?" I said, "The dog house." And they decorated my car that next Sunday morning, and it was just fun. And then my pastime is fly fishing, and I don't do it enough because I've been working too much. But my team's trying to get me to get out some more, and I'm working hard to make that happen as I work on a succession plan.
What's the one thing everybody should see when they're in Charlotte? Some people say the mountains, the trees, go out and do the trails. Some people point to certain iconic buildings. What's the one thing you think everybody should?
There's a lot of things.
It could be a landmark. It could be the mountain, whatever.
Well, there's a pretty significant landmark here. The city's grown up around it, but Spirit Square, which is Trine and Trade intersection, that was the place. The courthouse used to be on stilts above it. When Cornwallis and those guys were coming up during the Revolutionary War, they were coming up Trade Street from down near the CPCC. They're coming up the hill, and that's where we got the name Hornets. They said these guys are like Stern Hornets' Nest, and they couldn't get up that hill because the regiment here just kept pushing them back. And that Spirit Square is pretty cool. I love seeing what else happened and as development grows. But at the same time, we go into tough neighborhoods every Saturday morning, and anybody comes, you want to go with us, we're going to go to neighborhoods and just love on people. Or, welcome to come to church with us. It's not like it's a church like no other.
And then the last question, what do you think the hidden gem of Charlotte is?
It's people. It's people. The folks that are originally from here. It's hard to find them.
Yeah.
My uncle and his family used to live here, my dad's brother. Here in Charlotte, it's amazing to see what is happening here. It's amazing to see how many people show up and go, I don't know why I'm here, but I just came. And I don't know the whole story yet, but there's something about Charlotte that's special.
Charlotte's definitely displaced Atlanta. I don't think the people in Atlanta would say that, but we like Charlotte. We like, down on the Triangle. We like the, all of North Carolina.
I like Dallas
South Carolina.
too. I like that. I like Texas a lot. I like where you guys are from. Is that where you're from? You from there originally?
I'm from Oklahoma City originally and live in Dallas, yes.
Well, I went and sold books one summer in college. I was in Muskogee and McAllister. But I love that area out there, and particularly in South Texas. And I've gone with some of my investors. There's a lot of quail down there. And it's like the old days around here. And there's some good quail hunting down there around Falfurrias and stuff.
And then one of the last questions we always ask the guests is, where do we find you? And that's, whether it's Noble Food and Pursuits or Instagram or...
Noble Food and Pursuit covers it. Any of the websites you go to the bottom, it shows all the groups together, and you can get back to them, and you can probably get a message to me if you need to.
Jim, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're busy. Learning the story about Noble Food and Pursuits is kind of one of one. And so, again, I want to thank you for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm grateful for the partnership. You open a business, if you don't own the building, you end up having to lease a building from someone, and it has to be a partnership. Everybody has to win. If anybody tries to get the upper hand, it's going to be a feud going on. But you guys have been gracious. You've been great to work with, and we're excited about the future. And we got a couple of things up our sleeves, so keep your eyes open, okay?
Yeah. Thank you for your time today, and thanks for telling your story.
This has been Backstory and Beyond, hosted by Ward Kempf. To learn more about Northwood Retail or the destinations from today's episode, visit backstorybeyond.com.